We spend so much of our lives waiting for a specific kind of knock at the door. We look for a person, a word, or a moment that will finally arrive and say, "I see how hard it has been, and I am here to make it right." It is a heavy thing, carrying an empty space inside yourself and hoping someone else will bring the exact shape needed to fill it. You might notice it in the quiet moments, maybe when you are sitting in your car after a long day, watching the rain hit the windshield, or when you are staring out a window, feeling a profound sense of isolation, even when the room around you is full. It is an ache that sits quietly in the background of your mind, a faint whisper that tells you something fundamental is absent, even when you have done everything right on the outside. You look at your life, your home, or your routine, and yet there is this persistent feeling of being a visitor in your own existence. This emptiness often shapes how we move through the world without us even realizing it. We become collectors of people, achievements, and distractions, hoping that if we just gather enough things, the void will disappear. You might find yourself staying up late into the night, looking at old photographs or pacing through the hallway, trying to find a reason for the heavy, hollow sensation in your chest. It is a deeply exhausting way to live, because you are constantly running a race where the finish line keeps moving. You think, if I can just get through this week, or if I can just find someone who understands me, I will finally feel whole. But when the weekend comes, or when the relationship begins, the ache is still there, waiting for you in the dark. It is the realization that no matter how much love you pour into the world, the bucket inside you remains empty because it has a hole in the bottom that you haven't healed yet. We carry this longing like a secret shame, believing that everyone else has figured out the secret to belonging while we remain stranded on the outside. You see people laughing on the sidewalk or sharing a quiet moment on a bench, and you wonder what it feels like to exist so effortlessly. You ask yourself what is wrong with you, why you cannot just feel settled, and why the care you give so freely to others never seems to find its way back to your own heart. It is a lonely path to walk, feeling like a ghost in your own story, constantly looking at your reflection and seeing only the outline of who you wish you could be. We become so focused on what was denied to us in the past that we forget we are the ones holding ourselves hostage in the present. We keep looking backward, demanding answers from a past that can only offer silence. But the truth we often run from is that the rescue party we are waiting for isn't coming. Not because you aren't worth saving, but because the person who holds the key to that locked room is already standing on the inside. We look to the outside world to fix a fracture that happened deep within our own history. Carl Jung once observed, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." To begin that journey, we have to look at the missing pieces not as permanent damage, but as places where our own awareness has not yet been invited to rest. It means stopping the endless search outside of ourselves, and finally turning around to face the emptiness. It means sitting on the floor of that quiet room, looking at the hollow space, and deciding that you are going to be the one to stay. You are the one who has to learn the language of your own grief, to sit with the discomfort of your own unmet needs, and to gently tell yourself that you are no longer going to leave your own side, no matter how empty it feels right now. When we do not receive the care or validation we need early on, we learn to adapt. We take the parts of ourselves that were ignored, criticized, or misunderstood, and we hide them away in the basement of our minds. We become masters at presenting only the versions of ourselves that get applause, or at least ensure peace. Think about the times you forced yourself to smile when you were hurting, or when you agreed to plans you didn't have the energy for, just to avoid being a burden. You learn to tuck your tears away before anyone else can see them, swallowing your anger until it tastes like ash in your throat. We do this because, at some point in our lives, we were shown that our raw, honest feelings were too much, too loud, or too inconvenient for the people around us to handle. Every time we do this, we are telling ourselves the same old story. Who you really are is not enough. We become divided into two people, the one we show to the world to keep ourselves safe, and the one we lock away in the dark out of fear of rejection. You might notice this division when you are sitting alone at night, feeling an intense wave of loneliness that doesn't seem to make sense. That loneliness is actually the voice of your castaway self, crying out from the places you left behind. It is the part of you that wanted to scream when you were treated unfairly, the part that wanted to collapse when you were tired, and the part that desperately needed to be held just as you were, without having to prove your worth first. By keeping these parts hidden, we survive, but we do not truly live. We trade our wholeness for acceptance, and in doing so, we become strangers to our own reflection. It takes a massive amount of emotional energy to keep your own truth buried day after day. You have to constantly police your words, monitor your expressions, and anticipate what everyone else expects from you before you even allow yourself to speak. It is a slow, draining way to exist, like trying to hold a balloon underwater. Eventually, the surface cracks, and that hidden pain shows up as a sudden burst of frustration over something small, or a deep, heavy exhaustion that sleep can never seem to fix. You find yourself looking at your life and wondering why you feel so disconnected from everything you have built. The truth is, you cannot feel connected to anything outside of yourself when you are actively abandoning the person inside. You cannot accept love from others if you are constantly hiding the very parts of you that need that love the most. Healing begins when we stop abandoning ourselves to keep other people comfortable. It means walking down into that basement, turning on the light, and looking at the parts we hid away. The anger, the sadness, the deep exhaustion. We have to learn to welcome those castaway pieces back into the warmth of our own attention. Imagine sitting on the bottom step of that dark cellar and gently calling out to the versions of yourself you left behind years ago. It means looking at your sensitivity not as a weakness, but as a soft space that deserves protection. It means looking at your anger not as a flaw, but as a voice that was trying to defend a boundary that had been crossed. When we stop viewing our difficult emotions as enemies to be conquered, we can finally see them as wounded children waiting to be brought into the light. Reclaiming yourself is a quiet, radical act of defiance against the old idea that you are broken. It is a commitment to look at your most fragile, messy pieces and say, I see you, and I am not going to lock you away anymore. You start allowing yourself to feel sad when you are sad, without apologizing for the dampness on your cheeks. You start allowing yourself to be tired when you are tired, without making excuses for your lack of productivity. By doing this, you are slowly repairing the trust that was broken between your heart and your mind. You are proving to yourself that you can handle your own depth and that you are strong enough to hold space for your own pain. This is how the healing journey actually works. It is not about becoming a completely different person, but about gathering up all the forgotten, lonely parts of who you have always been, and finally bringing them home. You can see the blueprints of your oldest wounds in the ways you live your daily life right now. It shows up in how you react when a friend forgets to text you back, or how your heart starts racing when someone asks to speak with you privately. You might find yourself constantly over-preparing for a simple conversation, or rehearsing your answers in your head just to make sure you sound perfect. You might notice that when someone gives you a genuine compliment, your immediate instinct is to shrug it off, minimize it, or point out a flaw to balance it out. It is as if receiving warmth feels unfamiliar and unsafe, so you automatically push it away to return to a baseline of emotional isolation that you are used to. These habits are not random. They are the invisible threads connecting your present day to the moments in your past where you felt invisible. These are not just random habits. They are survival strategies that you built when you felt unsafe or unloved. When you were small or vulnerable, you had to find a way to navigate an environment that didn't know how to hold your feelings. If you learned that expressing sadness brought anger from others, you learned to become incredibly self-reliant, pretending that you never needed help from anyone. If you learned that you were only noticed when you were high achieving, you turned your life into a continuous effort to do more, be more, and fix everything for everyone. You became hyper-vigilant, constantly scanning the faces of the people around you for any sign of disapproval or withdrawal. It is incredibly important to look at these patterns without judgment. Before you can change a behavior, you have to understand the pain it was trying to protect you from. When we do not look into this mirror, we end up repeating the same painful cycles over and over again, wondering why we keep landing in the same exhausting situations. You might find yourself attracted to people who are emotionally unavailable, recreating the exact dynamic of having to beg for attention that you experienced years ago. You might find yourself burning out at work because you cannot say no, believing that your presence is only tolerated if you are entirely self-sacrificing. It is a painful realization when you notice that the walls you built to keep yourself safe have actually become the walls that keep you lonely. But seeing this pattern is not a reason to blame yourself. You were doing the best you could with the tools you had at the time. Those survival strategies kept you alive during the hardest moments of your life, and they deserve your gratitude before they can be laid down. Carl Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When we apply that inward, we see that our sharpest reactions are actually maps leading straight to the places that need our gentlest care. The next time you feel a sudden surge of panic because a plan changed, or a deep wave of resentment because someone didn't anticipate your needs, take a step back. Do not judge the reaction, and do not try to force it away. Instead, look at it as a flag being waved by a part of you that is still living in an old story. That sudden flash of anger or fear is just a wounded part of you trying to say, please don't let them hurt us the way they did back then. When you understand this, the pattern stops being a flaw you need to fix and becomes a call for comfort that you can finally answer. To change the pattern, you have to choose a different response in the exact moment the old fear is screaming at you to run or fight. It means sitting with the discomfort of a slow text response without sending a second message to fix it. It means allowing someone to see you when you are tired or unpolished, without trying to perform for their approval. This is slow, deliberate, and often terrifying work because it forces you to face the very vulnerability you spent a lifetime hiding. But every single time you choose to respond with presence instead of your old defense mechanism, you are telling yourself that you are safe now. You are proving that the present moment is different from the past, and that you are fully capable of protecting yourself without having to hide who you are. There is a distinct exhaustion that comes from trying to be flawless. Many of us came to believe that if we could just be successful enough, quiet enough, or helpful enough, we would finally earn the right to be loved. We turn our lives into an endless checklist of achievements. You buy the right things, keep up appearances, and stay organized. Yet the inner emptiness remains completely unchanged. You look at your life from the outside and think that it should be enough, that you have done everything required to feel settled and happy. Yet, when the sun goes down and you are left alone with your own breath, the quiet whisper returns, asking why you still feel like a fraud who is just one mistake away from losing everything. Perfection is the ultimate shield, but it is also a prison. It keeps people from seeing your flaws, but it also keeps them, and you, from seeing your humanity. You wear this flawlessness like heavy armor, walking through your days with your shoulders tense, terrified that if you let your guard down for even a single second, someone will notice the cracks. You become terrified of making a wrong turn, saying the wrong thing in a conversation, or leaving a task incomplete. Every small error feels like a devastating verdict on your value as a human being. But the tragic truth of holding up this shield is that even when people praise you for your strength, your competence, or your dependability, it never feels real. Deep down, your heart knows they are only praising the armor, not the vulnerable person hiding inside it. We carry this burden because we confuse being loved with being admired. We believe that if we can just become beyond criticism, we will finally be safe from the pain of rejection. You might notice this in how hard you are on yourself when you make a simple oversight, how you beat yourself up for days over a forgotten detail or an awkward phrase you used. You hold yourself to a standard that you would never, ever demand from anyone else. If a friend tells you they are struggling or that they made a mistake, you meet them with open arms and words of comfort. But when it comes to your own life, you treat yourself like a harsh judge, demanding perfection and offering zero mercy. It is a lonely, punishing way to exist, living under the thumb of a critic that is never satisfied, no matter how much you achieve. Giving yourself the love you deserved means letting the shield drop. It means accepting that you are allowed to make mistakes, to change your mind, and to have messy, unresolved feelings. It means looking at your limitations, not as personal failures, but as the very things that make you human. You have to practice the terrifying art of letting yourself be seen when you do not have it all together. It means allowing your voice to shake when you speak your truth, or letting someone see that your living space isn't perfectly arranged today because you were too tired to tend to it. When you stop hiding your vulnerability, you give yourself permission to finally breathe. You do not have to earn the right to exist, and you certainly do not have to be perfect to be worthy of comfort. Laying down this burden is a slow process of unlearning the lie that your worth is tied to your utility. You are not valuable because of what you can do, what you can fix, or how much pain you can absorb without crying out. You are valuable simply because you are here, navigating a difficult world with a heart that is trying its best. When you begin to accept your flaws, you create a soft space inside yourself where you can finally rest. You stop running from the fear of being inadequate, and you begin to realize that the most beautiful, authentic parts of you are found in the rough edges, the soft spaces, and the beautiful mess of your unfiltered humanity. We often carry conversations in our heads that ended years ago. An unkind word from a teacher, a cold look from a parent, or the sudden departure of a friend can become the permanent soundtrack of our inner lives. You might find yourself walking through a park or sitting on a bench, completely lost in a memory of a time you were made to feel small. It is a strange thing how a moment that lasted only a few seconds can stretch out and occupy decades of your life. You can still feel the exact temperature of the room, the way your chest tightened, and the heavy realization that you were completely unprotected. Even though you are an adult now, with a completely different life and new surroundings, that old moment can still pull you back in an instant, making you feel just as helpless as you were when you were a child. Those old voices can feel so real that we mistake them for our own thoughts. They tell us that we are difficult to love, that we are bound to fail, or that it is safer to stay quiet and invisible. You might notice this when you try to start something new, or when you find yourself on the verge of a beautiful connection with someone. Suddenly, a voice inside your head says, "Don't get your hopes up. They will leave just like everyone else did." Or, "Who do you think you are to want something better?" These are not true reflections of your reality. They are just the echoes of other people's limitations, fears, and unresolved pain that they projected onto you. When people do not know how to hold their own darkness, they often pass it down to those who are closest to them. And as children, we accept it because we do not know any better. We absorb their criticism as if it were truth, and we carry it forward like a heavy stone in our pockets. The tragedy is that we continue to punish ourselves for things that were never our fault. If someone didn't have the capacity to love you, you didn't conclude that they were limited. You concluded that you were unlovable. You carried that false conclusion into every relationship, every job, and every quiet moment of your life. You became hypersensitive to any sign of withdrawal, interpreting a quiet tone or a distracted look as proof that the old echo was right all along. It is deeply exhausting to live your life constantly defending yourself against a ghost. You are fighting an old battle that has already been lost, trying to convince people who are no longer there that you are actually worth keeping. When you notice that harsh inner critic starting to speak, pause for a moment. Ask yourself whose voice that actually is. Is it truly your own voice? Or is it the voice of someone who didn't know how to see you? Recognizing that the critical commentary running through your mind doesn't belong to you is the first major step toward silence. It is like realizing that the static on the radio isn't the song you are trying to listen to. It is just background noise from a station you passed a long time ago. You are allowed to gently but firmly tell that old echo that it no longer has a say in how you view yourself. You can look at that old memory and say, "That happened to me, but it is not who I am." To heal from these echoes, we have to talk back to them with a voice that is entirely our own. It requires us to stand up for that younger version of ourselves who couldn't speak up at the time. When the echo says you are a failure, you can choose to look at your survival and see your immense strength. When the echo says you are too much, you can remind yourself that you are allowed to have space, to have needs, and to express your feelings. This is how we break the cycle of old pain. We stop letting the people who hurt us write the script for the rest of our lives. We reclaim our inner narrative, slowly replacing the harsh, critical whispers of the past with a steady, compassionate voice that belongs entirely to the person we are becoming today. What does it actually look like to love yourself when no one else showed you how? It doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts in the smallest, most ordinary moments of your day. It is choosing to sit down and eat a nourishing meal instead of rushing through it. It is allowing yourself to take a walk, simply to feel the sun on your face, without feeling guilty about the things you aren't accomplishing. We often mistake self-love for an elusive destination, or a reward we can only earn after we have fixed every single one of our flaws. But true kindness to yourself is not a trophy for being perfect. It is the gentle, steady ground you stand on when everything else around you is shaky and uncertain. It is the quiet choice to treat yourself with a soft touch when you are feeling broken. Many of us are incredibly skilled at offering warmth and understanding to everyone else while leaving absolutely nothing for ourselves. You might find yourself listening to a friend weep for hours, holding their hand, and telling them that they are allowed to make mistakes. Yet the moment you stumble or fall short, you become your own worst enemy. You talk to yourself with a harshness that you would never use against anyone else. This deep imbalance leaves you feeling fundamentally exhausted and empty. You are constantly giving away the very nourishment you need to survive. Building self-kindness means realizing that you are not an exception to the rule of compassion. You are a human being who is just as deserving of patience, gentleness, and room to grow as every other soul on this earth. It is also found in how you talk to yourself when things go wrong. If you drop a glass or miss a turn while driving, notice the very first words that come out of your mouth. Notice the tone of voice that echoes inside your mind when you make a mistake at work or forget an important task. Is it a voice of comfort, or is it a voice of punishment? To build self-kindness, we have to become our own supportive companion. It means offering yourself the same patience, the same soft tone, and the same benefit of the doubt that you have so freely given to everyone else your whole life. It means catching yourself mid-sentence when the inner critic starts to shout, pausing, taking a deep breath, and saying, "It is okay. You are doing the best you can right now." And a mistake does not mean you are a failure. This practice requires us to lower our expectations of what a successful day looks like. When you are carrying a heavy weight of old hurts and trying to heal, simply getting through the day is an achievement. Self-kindness means looking at your exhaustion and allowing yourself to rest without attaching a feeling of shame to that rest. It is letting go of the constant pressure to produce, to fix, or to achieve just to feel like you matter. It is giving yourself permission to just be. You might practice this by sitting quietly with a warm cup of tea, watching the steam rise, and letting your thoughts settle without trying to force them into order. It is about creating a safe harbor within your own heart where you can retreat when the world outside becomes too loud or too demanding. Slowly, as you practice these tiny acts of daily gentleness, the internal atmosphere begins to shift. You start to notice that you aren't as terrified of failure because you know that if you fall, you will meet yourself with open arms instead of a scolding voice. You stop looking at your vulnerability as a defect and start seeing it as a beautiful, sensitive part of your humanity that needs your protection. This is how the foundation is built. not with a sudden explosion of confidence, but with the quiet, repetitive choice to be on your own side. You become the person who holds your own hand through the dark, proving to yourself day after day that you are finally safe. You are finally seen. And you are deeply, unconditionally cared for by the only person whose opinion truly matters. True affection cannot exist without safety, and safety requires boundaries. For a long time, you might have associated boundaries with selfishness or cruelty, because you were taught that your value lay entirely in your availability to others. You became the person everyone could count on, the one who always absorbed the shock waves of other people's bad moods. You learned to anticipate what everyone else needed before they even had to ask, bending your schedule, your energy, and your comfort until you were completely twisted out of shape. You might notice this in how you feel when someone asks you for a favor. Your stomach tightens. A heavy wave of dread washes over you. And yet the word yes leaves your mouth before you can even stop it. You say yes because the fear of disappointing someone or the terror of being seen as unkind feels much more dangerous than the slow, quiet destruction of your own well-being. But saying yes to everyone else often means saying no to yourself. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It is about drawing a clear line where you end and another person begins. It is saying, I care about you, but I cannot carry your weight at the expense of my own well-being. When you do not have boundaries, your life becomes a house with no doors or windows. Anyone can walk in at any time, track mud across your floor, disrupt your peace, and leave you to clean up the mess alone. You find yourself sitting on the edge of your bed, staring at the floor, feeling a deep, burning resentment toward the people you love. That resentment is not proof that you are a bad person. It is the voice of your soul, crying out, warning you that you are letting yourself be erased to keep the peace. We carry a deep terror that if we stand up for ourselves, we will be left entirely alone. You worry that if you say, I cannot help you move this weekend, or I don't have the emotional capacity to listen to this right now, the other person will walk away and never come back. And the painful truth is, some people might. The people who are used to you having no boundaries will often react with anger or sadness when you finally draw a line. They will call you cold or tell you that you have changed. It is incredibly important to understand that their reaction is not a reflection of your worth. It is a reflection of their loss. They are mourning the version of you that they could easily use to make their own lives comfortable. When you begin to protect your time, your energy, and your emotional space, you are finally acting as your own protector. You are stepping into the role of the person who should have defended you a long time ago. It means learning to speak your truth in a calm, steady voice without over-explaining your reasons or apologizing for your limitations. You do not owe anyone a 20-minute justification for why you cannot attend a gathering or why you need to end a conversation early. Your fatigue is enough. Your desire for quiet is enough. Your need to sit alone in a room and process your own thoughts is a completely valid reason to turn off your phone and step away from the world. This is a slow, uncomfortable process that requires you to sit with the burning sensation of guilt without rushing to fix it. The first few times you set a boundary, it will probably feel wrong. Your heart will race, your hands might shake, and you will feel an overwhelming urge to send a follow-up message to smooth things over. When that happens, take a deep breath and stay right there. Remind yourself that guilt is just an old habit of self-abandonment trying to reassert itself. By holding the line, you are teaching your mind that your peace is worth protecting. You are proving to yourself that you are no longer a helpless observer in your own life, but a mature guardian who has the courage to say, "This far and no further." We cannot talk about loving ourselves without talking about the parts of our personality that we find difficult to accept. We all have moments of envy, resentment, or selfishness that we would rather pretend aren't there. We worry that if people saw these sides of us, they would turn away. You might notice this when a wave of jealousy hits you because a coworker got a promotion, or when you feel a sudden flash of irritation towards someone who is genuinely struggling. Immediately, a deep sense of shame follows. You tell yourself that you are a bad person for even thinking such things, so you push the feeling down, lock it away, and put on a mask of perfect kindness. We become terrified of our own internal complexity, believing that if we possess any darkness at all, we are completely unlovable. We carry these hidden flaws like a dark secret, constantly on guard, lest anyone catch a glimpse of what lies beneath the surface. You might notice this tension when you are in a crowded room, nodding along to a conversation while feeling entirely disconnected from the words coming out of your mouth. There is a part of you that wants to drop the act, to admit that you are angry, tired, or deeply hurt by how you've been treated. But instead, you suppress it. We take the parts of ourselves that feel ugly, our capacity to be bitter, our desperate need for attention, or our silent judgments, and we cast them into the dark. Carl Jung famously stated, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This process isn't about punishing yourself for having difficult traits. It is about understanding why they are there. When we constantly hide our shadow, it doesn't actually disappear. It just grows louder in the dark. It starts to leak out in ways we can't control. It shows up as sudden bursts of irritability over an unwashed dish, or as a heavy, unexplained sadness that blankets your entire afternoon. You might find yourself judging other people harshly for the exact same flaws you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. It is a deeply exhausting battle to fight, because you are essentially waging war against your own mind. You are dividing yourself into the good part that deserves to be seen and the bad part that must be destroyed. But you cannot heal a wound by attacking it. You cannot find peace by casting a part of yourself out into the cold. Facing your shadow means sitting down with the very thoughts and feelings that make you uncomfortable. and meeting them with an open heart. The next time you feel a surge of resentment or a flash of bitterness, do not rush to push it away. Instead, take a deep breath and look at it with curiosity. Ask that heavy feeling what it is trying to protect you from. Often, our darkest or most difficult emotions are just wounded, frightened parts of us trying to defend themselves the only way they know how. Your jealousy might just be a hidden desire for recognition that you've denied yourself for years. Your anger might be a desperate cry from a part of you that has been stepped on too many times. When we meet our shadow with compassion instead of fear, the intensity of those feelings begins to soften, and they lose their power over us. This is a quiet, gentle reconciliation with the totality of who you are. It means looking into the mirror and accepting that you are a whole human being, complete with both light and shade. You are allowed to be a kind person who sometimes feels selfish. You are allowed to be a loving partner who sometimes needs space. By offering yourself this grace, you stop the endless civil war happening inside your chest. You create a safe, soft room within your own heart, where every part of you is welcome to sit by the fire. This is how true self-love is born, not by becoming an flawless being who never stumbles, but by having the immense courage to look at your most fragile, broken pieces and choosing to hold them gently anyway. A profound shift happens when you realize that you can be the provider of your own emotional needs. The child inside you who was left waiting, who felt unprotected, misunderstood, or unseen, is still there. Every time you feel overwhelmed, rejected, or deeply insecure, that is not just your adult self reacting to a modern inconvenience. That is the younger version of you reacting to an old wound. You can feel it when a friend cancels plans last minute, and a sudden, sharp panic rises in your chest that feels completely out of proportion to the situation. It feels like the end of the world, because to a younger part of you, being left behind actually did feel like the end of the world. We carry these fragile, younger versions of ourselves through our entire lives, and they are constantly looking out through our eyes, trying to see if it is safe yet. For most of our lives, we look to the outside world to soothe that frightened child. We look for a partner who will never make a mistake, a boss who will constantly applaud our efforts, or a friend who will anticipate our every unspoken need. We place the heavy burden of our childhood longings onto the shoulders of people who are just as messy and human as we are. And when they inevitably fail to give us the perfect, flawless care we missed out on, we feel a deep, crushing heartbreak. We feel abandoned all over again, sinking back into the old familiar story that we are simply not worth staying for. But the people in your life today cannot go back in time to fix what happened to you years ago. They cannot fill a bucket that has its foundation built on an old absence. You can learn to step into the role of the mature, loving guide that you needed back then. This is the essence of self-parenting. It means looking at your own distress, your tears, and your sudden bursts of anxiety, and refusing to scold yourself for being too sensitive. Instead of demanding that you just snap out of it or grow up, you pause, put a hand over your heart, and acknowledge the pain. You look at your own inner distress and say, I am right here. I see how scary this feels for you. I am not going to leave you, and we are going to get through this together. This isn't make-believe. It is a redirection of your emotional energy. It is becoming the very comfort you used to beg for from the outside world. Think about how you would treat a child who comes to you crying because they made a mistake or felt excluded. You wouldn't yell at them, tell them they are a failure, or lock them away in a dark room until they learn to be perfect. You would kneel down to their level. Look them in the eyes. Wrap your arms around them and tell them that mistakes are just how we learn. You would tell them that they are safe, that they are loved, and that nothing they do could ever change how much they matter. Self-parenting is simply having the courage to offer that exact same soft, unconditional warmth to yourself when you are the one who is hurting. It is choosing to be the patient, steady adult for your own fragile heart. By offering yourself that steady, unshakable presence, you begin to rewrite the old story of neglect from the inside out. You stop waiting for someone else to come along and validate your existence. When you learn to parent yourself, you build an internal sanctuary that no one can take away from you. You become the one who tucked you in, the one who listens to your fears without judgment, and the one who stands up to protect you when the world gets too loud. This is where your true power lies. You cannot change the past, and you cannot force the people who hurt you to understand your pain. But you can decide that from this day forward, the child inside you will never have to walk through the dark alone again. Because you are finally there to hold their hand. This journey of learning to love yourself is not a destination you reach overnight. It is a daily, deliberate choice to turn toward yourself instead of away. There will still be days when the old loneliness creeps in, or when the patterns of the past feel too heavy to lift. You might wake up on a gray morning and feel that familiar, cold weight sitting on your chest, tempting you to believe that all the progress you have made was just an illusion. You might find yourself falling back into an old habit of over-explaining your choices or seeking validation from someone who doesn't have the capacity to give it. But the difference now is that you know the way back to your own center. You no longer get lost in the dark for months at a time because you have learned how to strike a match within your own heart. As you continue to walk this path, you will notice that the world around you begins to shift. You stop begging for crumbs of validation because you are already full from the care you give yourself. You stand a little taller, breathe a little deeper, and move through life with a quiet confidence. Think about how beautiful it is to finally walk into a room and not care whether every single person approves of you, simply because you approve of yourself. You stop looking at every interaction as a test you have to pass or a performance you have to give. You allow yourself to just occupy space, to speak your truth without polishing it first, and to let your genuine feelings show on your face. You realize that you do not need to be a perfectly manicured version of yourself to deserve a place at the table of life. This transformation shows up in the quietest, most beautiful ways. It is found in the moment you look at your reflection in a mirror, and instead of immediately searching for a flaw to critique, you look into your own eyes with a sense of deep, abiding gratitude. You look at the lines on your face and the tiredness in your eyes, and you think, look at everything we have survived together. You begin to treat your life as a sacred space that deserves protection, rather than a clearinghouse for everyone else's demands. You find that you have more energy to give to the things that actually feed your soul. The quiet walks, the simple meals, the honest conversations with people who truly see you. The frantic, hurried pace of your old life begins to slow down, replaced by a steady, calm rhythm of self-respect. Walking into your own light means accepting that your healing is an ongoing story, and that it is okay if some chapters are still messy. You learn to have immense patience with your own timing, knowing that a flower cannot be forced to bloom any faster by pulling on its petals. You accept that there will be moments of doubt and days of sadness, but you meet those moments with a soft embrace rather than a heavy fist. You have finally become the person you were waiting for, and that is a bond that nothing outside of you can ever break. You are no longer stranded on the shore of your own life, hoping for a passing boat to save you. You have become the captain of your own ship, steering yourself toward calmer, warmer waters with a steady and loving hand. Take a deep breath and look at how far you have traveled from the days when you felt entirely invisible and unloved. You have built a home inside yourself out of the very pieces that were once rejected. You have faced the cold echoes of the past, embraced the hidden parts of your shadow, and learned to parent your own fragile heart with an unconditional tenderness.